Well, if it flies, floats, or f***s, it's cheaper to rent. Well, congratulations, you've convinced yourself that that old adage is just not true, at least in the flying category. You're in the market for an airplane. There's a lot to know, so I'm going to break each step down for you in this two-part episode and share lessons learned from my 2 times going through this process. In part 1, we'll talk about mission analysis, budget, maintenance, analyzing models, picking your model, financing, storage, and insurance. In part 2, we'll get hunting and find our candidates, sort through some lemons. We'll negotiate a price. We'll drop a purchase agreement, do a pre-buy inspection, close escrow, and fly our new bird home to her new nest. As always, each chapter is marked in the timeline if you need to skip around, but make sure to stick around to the end where I'll show you around this brand new to me airplane.
Hey, it's Steve. Welcome back to Clear Direct. Okay, let's scope this out. We're going to talk specifically shopping for certified pre-owned general aviation fixed-wing aircraft. But if you're shopping for pre-owned experimental, I think you'll still find some of these tips useful. And make sure to subscribe to see my home build series coming real soon. Now, this content was informed by my 2 buying experiences and some research, but I don't claim to know everything. Please let me know in the comments if I can clarify anything or how your experience differed. But I hope it helps. So let's get into it. Let me start by saying that if you're not willing to put in some work in the way of research, communication, and maybe even travel, you may be better off going with a broker. I'll leave a link in the description to an article about brokers, but it's a bit biased since it was written by a broker. But if you're up for the challenge and want to save at least 5%, it can be pretty rewarding to take this challenge on yourself. The first place to start is to really understand your mission. How do you plan on using the airplane? Be honest with yourself. The main reason I've seen people buy an airplane is 1, to build flight time and gain experience to work on more advanced ratings, buying a bush plane for backcountry adventures and aerobatics, and 4, business and leisure travel, which is the category that I'm in, so it'll be the focus of the rest of this mission chapter. If you're not quite there yet in convincing yourself or your significant other to pull the trigger and buy, I have this donut theory. Look at a map. Draw a ring around your home drome that delineates the range that you feel it's more convenient to drive a car to your destination versus fly yourself. Don't lie to yourself and make it too small. Remember, when dreaming about flying to your destination, you may need to rent a car when you get there. All right, next, draw the bigger ring, another ring, at the range where you feel it's more advantageous to fly the airlines. Now that you've defined your donut, ask yourself if your most frequent destinations fall inside that donut. If so, congrats, you've got a new way to justify this purchase. If your mission falls right on that outer ring, ask yourself, is there a direct airline service between these 2 locations? If not, I'd bump out that outer ring. In doing this exercise, you probably thought about the value of your time. Well, take it a step further, put an actual dollar amount on your time. I'm not talking about your hourly wage or your salary. I'm talking about what you would pay to have more time in the day to play with your kids or visit your aging parents post-COVID or visit the Grand Canyon. This is meant to get you thinking about budget. Yeah, we're still in the mission discussion, but budget is a very important part of that. The cost of owning an airplane is very different than owning a car. I like to think about the costs in 3 categories: initial costs, fixed costs, and hourly costs. The initial costs include down payment, loan fees, sales tax, travel, pre-purchase inspection, registration fees, and don't forget, you may have to get a checkout in the make and model, which will cost more than 0. The fixed costs are hangar tie-down, insurance, and monthly payment. Annual inspection also fits into this fixed cost category, even though the actual amount will vary year to year. It's fixed because it doesn't depend on flight hours unless you plan to fly that plane more than 100 hours a year. Hourly costs are fuel, oil, and the indirect cost of engine life. Engines need crazy expensive, I'm talking new car expensive overhauls every few thousand hours, so you absolutely have to budget for that. The last thing I'll say on the budget topic is there's pretty much a direct relationship between cost and moving a lot of stuff through the air. And if you want to do it quickly, it becomes exponential very rapidly. Don't worry, there are some great options and great values out there, so stick with me. All right, let's talk about those 2 variables I just mentioned, useful load and speed. Not to insult your intelligence, but for the toe dippers or drivers by, useful load is pilot, passengers, baggage, and fuel weight. While the number of seats is important, useful load is even more important since very few 4-seaters can actually carry 4 adults, baggage, and full fuel. but you may not need full fuel depending on the mission requirements. Now, the more I fly, the more I find that speed is not worth breaking the bank. Perhaps my perspective has been skewed flying fighters, that 20 knots difference between types isn't that big of a deal, but I really don't think it is. You're already winning by flying over the traffic and going in straight shots. It's like Charmin says, enjoy the go. Now, you can make up a lack of speed with better range, eliminating fuel stops. So I contend that behind useful load, range nudges out speed on my priority list. So that's 3 things. The number 4 thing is avionics in the way of IFR, VFR equipment. Since I'm north of the 40th parallel, IMC usually spells ice, and I avoid it like the plague. So I treat IFR equipment as nice to have. If it's a must for you and you operate in these northern latitudes, you may want to consider investing in an aircraft certified for a flight into known icing conditions, or FICI. But that's spendy, and TKS liquid will eat into your useful load. So you can tell this is a game of trade-offs. For me, my mission is to move 4 people with minimum baggage, 250 miles 2 to 4 times a month. 3 of these humans are small but growing pretty fast, and I'd like to do the trip fairly quickly, which takes a bit more fuel. Suffice to say, I need a useful load of at least 1,000 pounds. There are a number of aircraft that do this mission really well. Take an honest look at your mission and try to quantify it like I did. Next up, educate yourself on what's required of an aircraft owner-operator with respect to maintenance. For example, what's the difference between an advisory circular and an airworthiness directive? Is one required and another not? You've also got to arm yourself with some basic maintenance knowledge when shopping for an airplane to know how to read aircraft maintenance logs, know how to spot a modification and the STC or lack thereof. If you don't want to know what I'm talking about, start off by reading Mike Bush's series of books, which are excellent and you can download now. I'll link them below, and I'm not being paid to say that, nor making any money off of the links. They're truly a great resource. While zeroing in on your target model and year or range of models and years, pay attention to the design, maintenance, sustainability, and flying characteristic quirks that you may want to avoid. Earlier model VTail Bonanzas had a finicky fuel system that has bitten many pilots. Ask me how I know. You may find yourself avoiding this airplane because its reputation as a doctor killer, but when you look at the data, it suggests those structural issues have been fixed, and it's a very safe airplane if you're aware of the few gotchas. Early Cessna 210s had an overly complicated gear retract mechanism. So learning about the aircraft is a matter of reading online articles, aircraft-specific forums like Beach Talk or Mooney Space. If you've narrowed your search to a specific manufacturer, I'd recommend paying for a membership to the main society, such as Cessna Pilots Association or American Bonanza Society. I pulled many juicy nuggets off of forums and society sites. Another place I'd recommend going is onto the FAA's website and search for airworthiness directives that could affect your favorite aircraft. You don't need to be an expert, just get familiar with the website and how to search and read ADs. For example, the VTail Bonanza has a few ADs that require wing spar webbing inspections, as well as some turnbuckle inspections in the right aileron, right? So this is important when you start going through a candidate's airplane maintenance logs. More on that later. Now, if you go to your local airport's FBO and start asking for opinions, take them with a grain of salt. We all have varying experience and ideas on our own mission. You know your mission best. Now, if your budget is unlimited, you're probably buying new or paying a broker and not watching this video. But if you're like me and have fiscal constraints, you'll have to concede and go with a model that has maybe some known issues you'll have to work around, which brings me to my next major point. Find a mechanic with knowledge of your chosen aircraft type that's willing to take you on before you buy. You should be open to allowing this to influence which make and model you buy, because it can really make or break your aircraft ownership experience. This was pretty miserable for me on my first airplane, I'll be honest, and I learned the hard way. You don't need to have your favorite chosen mechanic on your airfield, but you should have a mechanic on your airfield to help you with minor issues to get you airborne so you can fly to your guy or gal. If you're interested in learning more about your airplane and doing an owner-assisted annual inspection, ask your mechanic if they're open to that. Mine's not, which was a little disappointed, but he explained to me why and made some good points. That's not to say you can't do anything yourself. It's pretty rewarding and can save some money to learn to change your oil yourself, get your hands and elbows dirty.
Hey, thanks to the Pilot Network for sponsoring this episode. You know, a great network can be the difference between having the career we love or the job we need. For 30,000 plus members, the Pilot Network has reconnected old aviation colleagues, provided knowledge in the face of the unknown, and extended the helping hand to those coming up in this awesome career field. If you're a career aviation professional or interested in becoming one, don't hesitate to become part of one of the fastest growing networks for aviation professionals. It's truly my first stop when I have airline-related questions, from bidding my line to what's happening at other airlines to even grabbing a discount on a mortgage. Along with being a correspondent, I've also helped answer fellow members' questions about scoring a military pilot job. Also, the TPN podcast is one of my favorites to listen to. They get fascinating guests from all around the industry and ask thought-provoking questions. So visit TPN today at thepilotnetwork.com.
If you're borrowing money to make this happen, the next step is to find a lender and get pre-approved. Now, look into learning about the lender's financing terms. This is a foot stomper. Check it out. I was fat, dumb, and happy looking for a late 60s, early 70s model Bonanza when I floated a pricey, sexy-looking late 70s model by him, and he told me my monthly payment would actually decrease because it was newer than 1974, which allowed my 15-year loan to become a 20-year term, and my rate dropped by 0.1%. So obviously proceed with caution, since now I started salivating over more expensive aircraft. Stick to your budget. If you're budgeting by monthly payment, then hell, go for it. Think about where you're gonna park at the aircraft. Tie down outside, rent a hangar, buy a hangar. The only advice I'll give you is if you can afford a hangar, do it. But heads up, a lot of airports have waiting lists for hangars, years long, and it's the reason why I'm sitting out on the ramp freezing my ass off talking to you. Being out on the ramp also really limits my flying in the winter for obvious reasons, but another not so obvious reason on a beautiful day like today is I don't start my airplane when it's below 45 degrees. I don't have a way to preheat it. If you buy a hangar, don't forget to budget for utilities, property taxes, and monthly airport ground lease. It's not the end of the world if you don't get a hangar. Don't let that stop you. But the colder or wetter the climate, the more I try to get a hangar. Fortunately, I should be in a hangar by summer, knock on wood. Okay, next, insurance. Call an aircraft broker and get a few quotes. If you have a few makes, models, and years you're mulling over, an insurance quote can really help you decide. Some companies won't even insure you until you have a few hours in that type, especially high performance and complex models. Having a good insurance company was invaluable after my crash. They didn't add to my already high stress and paid out quickly regardless of fault. We didn't know yet. NTSB is still investigating. That said, finding a company to insure me after my loss, regardless of loss, was nearly impossible. Luckily, I found one. Now that you've settled on a few makes, models, and years comes the fun part, the hunt.